One of our core values at St. Michael's University School is respect. With this in mind, we acknowledge that our school rests in the heart of Strait Salish territory, a living culture with its own rites, ceremonies, and unfolding history.
We honor the Esquimalt, Songhees, and Wasanich peoples, whose homelands we share and whom we recognize as our neighbors.
Hi everyone, my name is Tina. Thank you all for being here to our second Smooth Talk event this year. Smooth Talk is a student-run club allowing individuals to gather and inspire each other through speeches and expression. The theme for tonight is the glass ceiling.
My name is Karina and we'll be your MCs for tonight. We are really glad to have 3 student speakers and can't wait to welcome them onto the stage.
Our first speaker is Beatrice, who will talk about the impact of stereotypes from different perspectives.
Hello. Okay. My name is Beatrice, and I have the honor of being the first speaker of tonight, and I'm very excited. I hope you all enjoy this. And without further ado, I'm going to start by talking about the impact of stereotypes. We live in a modern world with assumptions from the Dark Ages. Nelson Mandela once said, "We slaughter one another in our words and attitudes. We slaughter one another in the stereotypes and mistrust that lingers in our heads and the words of hate we spew from our lips." Stereotypes have an impact. A stereotype is assumption about someone based on their appearance, age, culture, or race. It could be the little grudge you hold against an individual because of the way they look, or the motivations behind why you decide to change your life. They can be good or bad, about positive or negative things, but the same truth lies. They are things assumed without context. Stereotypes are everywhere, and they have the power to incite change. To understand where stereotypes came from, we need to look way back to the beginning of humanity. From an evolutionary perspective, judging was beneficial to early man. Knowing who looked like you, who came from the same place as you, and who dressed like you made it easier to tell who was in your tribe and who wasn't. This evolutionary skill exists in modern humans as the form of stereotypes. We use them in a similar way to our ancestors. When we first see someone, we subconsciously categorize them by their appearance and label them. Whether we realize it or not, these labels and connections make us act towards and think about those people differently. For example, a common stereotype is dumb blondes. I'm sure you're all heard of them. When many people see a blonde person, they will subconsciously label them as dumb until proven otherwise. By categorizing someone, you ultimately change the way you act towards them. This is a form of social categorization and is one of the many impacts stereotypes have. But how does this tie in with what's going on now? Before the media, there was a standard of stereotypes only distributed in person. In recent years, stereotypes have exploded due to the internet. Through media, stereotypes have become popularized and spread throughout the world. There are countless trends of memes, photos, and challenges seen by millions that actually change the views of humanity, which is pretty crazy. However, often these widespread stereotypes aren't necessarily a good thing. For example, I'm sure many of you have watched videos that have an "if you do this, you are ADHD, gay, as smart as an Asian kid." Not only does this have a negative impact on your self-esteem, but it also changes your stereotypes of those people. These ideas give a polarized view and impact your actions towards others. Personally, I have watched these videos before, and they have a similar effect on me. In addition to this, there are more negative impacts of stereotypes. One major one is the stereotypes of people with disabilities. These stereotypes often assume that if people aren't physically or mentally capable of doing something, then they aren't capable of doing anything else. Well, my best friend Margot is blind, and I can tell you this is not the case. In her experience, people are unsure about her. They ask her questions about her blindness, such as, "Do you need to touch my face? Do you have heightened senses like Daredevil? Do you close your eyes when you sleep? She says these questions are influenced by the media. Social media has produced strange assumptions about blind people. The stereotyping about them depicts them as lesser than the average person, or at the least inhuman. Even if people know this is completely untrue, their actions towards Margot will change. For example, when she walks through the halls, some people whisper under their breath as she passes by. Other people try to help her. She says one of the worst things about her blindness is how people don't give her credit. After a test, some people will accuse her of cheating, changing the braille. Or inquire, others attribute her musical ability to the fact that she is blind. In reality, Margot's already at a disadvantage, so she gives more effort than the average person. The problem with being blind is sometimes people only see her as her disability, not as the crazy talented person she is. Largely, this is due to stereotypes, people assuming they already have an idea of who a blind person is. My experience of stereotypes is different. When I was younger, in elementary school, I was seen by my friends and classmates as a quiet kid. I spent my recesses reading because nobody wanted to the shy, quiet kid. After all, I was different from them, or at least they saw me as being different from them. If they had spoken to me, they would have realized that I was funny and creative, very similar to them. When middle school came around, I got a chance to re-represent myself. Then I was positively stereotyped. During the beginning of high school, the playing field completely changed. It was my first year at SMU, and I knew nobody at the school. Honestly, it was challenging. One of my main strategies to find my ground at the school was to stereotype people. Through this method, I got to know people very quickly and found some friends that I relate to. So what have we learned? Stereotyping can have both positive and negative impacts. It's known as the most accurate form of social psychology, but there are times when it is extremely inaccurate. It has the power to bring groups of people together, but also to divide them further apart. Stereotypes are also heavily influenced by the social media and our nature as social animals. But most importantly, stereotypes have a significant impact on day-to-day social interactions. I will leave you with a final thought. How can you change your views on stereotypes to make them have a more positive impact? Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice. That was a really intriguing topic and an amazing way to start the show.
Next up, we have Jiang, who will speak about how we can find a way to express who we are.
The secret to life is to put yourself in the right lighting. For some, it's a Broadway spotlight. For others, a lamplit desk. Use your natural power, a persistence, concentration, and insight to do work you love and work that matters. This quote by Stephen King, the author of the book Quiet, The Power of an Introvert in a World That Can't Stop Talking, is one that had made a very big impression on me. Please keep it at the back of your mind, as this sentence will play an important role in my speech today. It seems like silence is unnatural and intimidating in a world where we're taught to express ourselves in a continuous loop. It is as though living life out loud, for all to hear and for all to see every little thing that we do, has become the way of the world. Every thought, opinion, action, dream, and desire has an outlet. In our society, the ideal self is bold and comfortable in the spotlight. That has never been me. Since my arrival to SMU, I desire to change myself completely. I wish to be like the kids who was able to make friends with everyone in an instant and be able to talk to anyone. I wish to not be afraid of speaking out loud, my head haunted by the fact that others may judge me or reject me ever so negatively. I was afraid of breaking that glass ceiling. Sometimes I think if I were able to convert myself, who is more introverted, I'd react to certain situations in a much better way. But maybe not. As a quiet person who works strictly based on plans and to-do lists and timelines, I detest spontaneity and change. I relish routine and sameness because when I get used to things, it fulfills my desire for certainty. Only recently, I was forced to face with a challenge that came to me in the very last minute. It was a project that was created by my group of friends and I back in my home country, Vietnam. And it was on a topic that I was very passionate about, working with art therapy and helping little children. I adore everything, and I adore the way that it was in place, and was so ready to come back home this spring break to execute the plan. Just as I received a text message from my mother. "I'm sorry, darling. You cannot come back anymore. The COVID cases are rising non-stop. Meetings after meetings, days after days after nights, all gone to dust just after one sentence. I was broken down into pieces. At any moment, the memory flashed through my mind. My body was struck by the deafening thought. My throat tightened. I wanted to stop the plummeted flood of tears racing down my cheeks, but it was impossible. I felt unproductive and lifeless for the whole week, and then blamed myself for not being able to achieve as much as I usually do. Like any other boarders, I decided to talk with my house parents, and it was a conversation that I shall remember forever. She said, "Young, you have the drive and the will it takes to do any kind of philanthropic initiative to change the world. But when faced with change, you must learn that even the mightiest and most determined people cannot control everything." Not only did I have to learn the lesson the hard way, but other people as well, no matter introverted, extroverted, or anywhere in between the spectrum. We learn that change is inevitable, and whether you fear it, shun it, or ignore it, you have to accept change, no matter how unexpected or spontaneous it may be. The glass ceiling no longer exists, but just unique individuals on the same journey to learn and to grow. None of us here are limited to one label, especially when those labels are loaded terms. At first, I thought it is that enjoyment of solitude that taught me to appreciate the many little things in life that others seem to overlook. I've always been a person who is fond of quietness and spending time alone. Silence isn't completely devoid of sound, but it is when the bird sings, the wind blows, the leaf whispers, and your heart beats. Silence is not the absence of words, but the presence of focus. There is so much to hear if you just listen. I was a person who found the quarantine to be wasn't too bad after all, because I'm never bored of being alone, and I found various activities for myself to do to heal and revitalize my soul, such as painting, drawing, or simply taking a peek out the window to see the streets no longer drowned out by the mechanical vigor of human existence. But I later realized that doesn't mean I hate the loud sounds either. When in a working environment, I'm a leader who talk and instruct as much as needed, and I suggest my ideas whenever inspiration strikes. And I am not afraid of standing tall and speaking out for the wrongdoings and injustice of the world. Stereotypes kills opportunities to learn about individuals. They create boundaries and false assumptions, pushing the influence of misunderstanding. I believe the key for us to see deeply into one and another is through open-mindedness and empathy, because we can all find a way to declare who we are, what our style of communication are, and how we wish to share our voice, whether be it loud, quiet, or a little something in between. For me, time, patience, encouragement, and understanding help me to look at the world through a broader lens. How about you? Do you dare breaking that glass ceiling to view the people who you surround yourself by every day from a different perspective? That is the question that I hope to leave you with introspection. My name is John, and thank you for your attention today.
Thank you, John. That was truly incredible.
And now we have a musical performance from Tomoe.
It's the way you say my name. It's the way you play your games. But it's so I've never known anybody like you. But it's so I never dreamed of nobody like you. And I've heard of a love that comes once in a lifetime. And I'm pretty sure that you are that love of mine. 'Cause I'm in a field of dandelions, wishing on everyone that you'll be mine, mine. And I see forever in your eyes. I feel okay when I see you smile, smile. Wishing on dandelions all of the time, praying to God that one day you'll be mine. Wishing on dandelions all of the time, all of the time. I think that you are the one for me. 'Cause it gets so hard to breathe when I'm looking at you. I never felt so alive and free. When you're looking at me, I never felt so happy. And I've heard of a love that comes once in a lifetime. And I'm pretty sure that you are the love of mine. 'Cause I'm in a field of dandelions, wishing on everyone that you'll be mine, mine. And I see forever in your eyes. I feel okay when I see you smile, smile. Wishing on dandelions all of the time, praying to God that one day you'll be mine. Wishing on dandelions all of the time, all of the time. Dandelions into the wind you go. Won't you let my darling know? Dandelions into the wind you go. Won't you let my darling know that I'm in a field of dandelions, wishing on everyone that you'll be mine, mine. And I see forever in your eyes. I feel okay when I see you smile, smile.
really good, and welcome to the second part of our event today.
Now introducing Delaney to speak about pretty privilege and its unforeseen benefits and consequences.
Hello everyone, and welcome to my Smooth Talk. My name is Delaney Arkell. I'm a second-year senior who lives in Timmins House, and I'm here to talk about pretty privilege. I'm someone who has benefited from pretty privilege throughout my life. This is not to say that I think I'm exceptionally good-looking or anything like that. It means that I've been provided certain opportunities and niceties because society values and finds women who are thin, young, with Eurocentric features conventionally attractive, and I've been treated better because of that. While pretty is a subjective term, pretty in terms of pretty privilege can be defined as someone who fits conventional beauty norms, meaning that, if speaking about women specifically, she is thin or curvy in a way that society deems acceptable. Think Kylie Jenner. She's white, conventionally feminine, and has Eurocentric features, like a small nose, blue eyes, straight or blonde hair, etc. If you fit these, then congratulations, you've almost definitely experienced pretty privilege in your life. Now, this isn't to say that you haven't missed out on opportunities or that you haven't struggled in other parts of your life because you're pretty. Having privilege in one area doesn't mean that you lack privilege in other areas, but it does mean that you haven't been treated worse because of your appearance. Here's a checklist to see if you fit within the definition of pretty privilege. Obviously, the definition of pretty for pretty privilege is extremely flawed, and there are a million different ways that someone can be beautiful. But for the purpose of this presentation, we are going with society's flawed definition, which means pretty is thin, white, and feminine. It's also important to remember that pretty privilege exists on a bit of a spectrum. A woman that is white and blonde but plus size may experience different parts of pretty privilege than an Asian woman who is thin. However, when all of the qualities or questions on this slide are checked off, that is when a person will experience the most privilege. Although I didn't really realize it until I started reading and learning about it, I have experienced pretty privilege from a young age. People have pretty much always been nice to me, offering seats, waiving fees, paying me extra attention, and always stepping in when it looks like I'm struggling. I started paying attention to the number of times that when talking about my future career, adults, whether teachers, college advisors, aunts and uncles, and even my parents, would say things like, well, you're smart and pretty, so you'll get a good job. Like me being pretty matters almost as much as my intelligence does. Like it was something that I should list on my job application under my 4.0. I'm incredibly fortunate to be considered attractive by society. I'm afforded opportunities and treated well simply because I won the genetic lottery in terms of Western ideals. And maybe you've heard some of my examples and thought, well, maybe people are just being nice to you. Maybe you're reading into this. This is not an experience that's unique to me. One of my favorite authors, Florence Given, best summarized what pretty privilege looked like for cis, thin white women like us when she said, I sit high on the scale of desirability, being slim, non-disabled, white, cisgender, and feminine. People open up to me and see me as nice and innocent before I even get a chance to open my mouth. I could be awful, but I am afforded many privileges as a result of being desirable by society. Because I am white, I am more likely to be seen and heard. Because my gender expression aligns with society's expectations, I am more likely to be desired. Because I am thin, I have the luxury of being able to dress myself in whatever clothes I like. I don't have to worry about stores not having my size, and I am not questioned about my health choices. Because I am cisgender, people don't question me about my genitals when shopping for clothes the same way they might a trans person. By existing in the body that I do, I am treated better by society, and that isn't fair. If you're still not convinced by me and Florence Given, here are some statistics on pretty privilege. From a Smithsonian Magazine article titled How Much is Attractiveness Worth? Studies showed that both conventionally attractive men and women tend to be paid more than less attractive counterparts, with handsome men poised to make 13% more during his career than appears considered to be looks challenged. During a recession, attractive people are also more likely to be hired. Even in academia and sports, this lookism exists. Given the increased popularity of Joe Burrow, the Bengals quarterback that TikTok is obsessed with, you might be interested to know that less attractive quarterbacks make 12% less than attractive quarterbacks. And meanwhile, in academia, professors that were considered more attractive by their students earned 6% more than other members of their department that failed to receive the same attention. Besides statistics, the existence of pretty privilege can also be seen in stories from people that acquired pretty privilege. Let me explain using 2 examples. Mermaid Keels is a girl from Kentucky who went viral on TikTok when she began experiencing pretty privilege after she lost over 100 pounds. She described immediately experiencing little subtle things that you wouldn't notice, not being charged for that extra drink or dessert at a restaurant, or having someone offering to put the air in your tires instead of seeing you struggle doing it. She also said that people expressed doubt, saying, well, maybe people are just doing a good deed. And she agreed that they're doing a good deed, but why didn't they do that good deed when I was 257 pounds? She expressed that all of a sudden, all these good deeds started happening to me the moment I looked like this. I went from one good deed happening to me a year to 10 of them happening in 1 week. Mermaid Keels' transition to pretty privilege resulted from her losing weight, but that's not the only way people have begun experiencing pretty privilege. In an article for Allure, Jeanette Mock writes about how after she transitioned from man to woman, she began to experience the pretty privilege she yearned for before and during her transition. In her article, she stated that, by 16, I began to notice the way people treated me had shifted. They no longer stared at my body in confusion. They no longer questioned my gender because I began to present more clearly as a girl, specifically a cis girl. And suddenly I was successful at passing, blending in with the cis girls that I'd once watched in fascination. Mock does an incredible job of describing her journey into pretty privilege, saying, suddenly I was let in, and I did nothing to earn the attention my prettiness granted me. I soon saw that people stared and smiled, offered me seats on the bus and drinks in the club, complimented me on my appearance, and held doors open. Mock's experience of being let in describes pretty privilege as almost a secret club that you can only gain access to once you fit society's aesthetic ideals, making life easier solely based on your appearance. Of course, there are downsides to being conventionally attractive. I've been followed home from school, harassed walking around various cities, catcalled out of cars and walking down the street, and not been taken seriously because I was too pretty to be smart, because heaven forbid you have both boobs and a brain. Of course, these experiences are not exclusive to pretty women. Being a woman period means that, unfortunately, you get harassed by a lot of assholes. But being a pretty woman specifically means that these encounters often happen with more frequency. There's a discussion about whether desirability is really a privilege, since its benefits are rooted in the objectification of our bodies, not respecting our whole selves. My prettiness is both the thing that causes people to treat me better, and also the thing that has led to the most traumatic experiences of my life. Men don't look at pretty women on the street and think, she's pretty, so I won't sexually harass her or follow her home. It's the opposite. I walk through life with constant vigilance, anxious about the next man who will stick his head out of his car window and shout something at me, who will spike that drink that my prettiness encouraged him to buy for me, or who will force me to stop in a shop before I go home to make sure that I'm not being followed. I was 9 the first time my dad pulled me aside to tell me that I had to be careful because I was a pretty girl. We were rock climbing, and I remember looking him dead in the eyes and asking, well, why does that matter? I would eventually learn, of course, why that matters, because certain things in life are dependable, and one of those is growing up as a pretty girl introduces you to a lot of harsh realities and shitty situations. However, while this desirability has led to numerous bad experiences in my life, that does not discredit the privileges that I have also been afforded due to my looks. You might be wondering why I'm talking about this. Why does it matter? Why talk about or acknowledge pretty privilege? It seems pointless, right? I want to talk about it because pretty girls aren't supposed to be aware of their beauty. That's unbecoming. When someone tells you you're pretty, you're supposed to get flustered or make a self-deprecating comment. I love your body. Oh my god, no, my arms are so fat. You've probably heard an exchange like this before, or something similar. Owning your beauty and acknowledging the fact that you're gorgeous isn't allowed. However, this means that a lot of commentary around pretty privilege doesn't happen because women are taught that they're not allowed, at least publicly, to accept the fact that they're attractive. It's really hard to talk about pretty privilege if you're not supposed to acknowledge that you have it. But by denying your own privilege, whether it's derived from whiteness, being able-bodied, or being pretty, means that you're preventing conversations about this privilege. The thing about privilege is that it cannot exist without oppression. Pretty people are treated better because those who don't fit into this flawed definition are treated worse. If we want to dismantle these problematic systems and hierarchies, we have to openly acknowledge that we are privileged. I'll start. I'm pretty and I benefit from my looks. Let's talk about it. I'm Delaney Arkell, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for sharing, Delaney.
Next, we have our guest speaker. Please welcome Ms. McDonald.
Thank you for inviting me to speak. I'm really happy to have the opportunity. Thank you. When I was 17, I went looking for a summer job. Getting a summer job was tough for a teenager where I grew up, which was rural Cape Breton, a region in Canada that is perennially economically depressed. In my hometown, local businesses would apply to the federal government for youth employment grants, and students were lucky to get a minimum wage job. It was even tougher for high school students because employers tended to favor university students. But I was optimistic about my prospects because I had parents who taught me to be proactive and not wait for opportunities to come to me. So I threw myself into the enterprise of cold calling. I phoned local businesses to express my interest in summer employment. I had not yet realized that conscious or unconscious bias might mean that some people would be looking for a reason not to hire me. I knew that the senior citizens complex next to my parents' house was posting a student position, so I phoned the man in charge of maintenance. One of my parents must have given me his name and phone number. On the phone, we had an awkward conversation when I told him I was interested in the summer maintenance job. He flat out told me that they were looking for a boy. But I was undeterred because I had a second wave feminist mother who told me that I could do anything I wanted. So I asked him, well, what does the job involve? He itemized the yard work and the maintenance tasks, and each time I said, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that. And finally he asked me, well, can you drive a standard? And at that point in my life, I had to concede that no, I could only drive an automatic transmission. And he was able to triumphantly say, well, you need to be able to drive a ride-on lawnmower, and you don't qualify for the job. It was a different era. No doubt today, very few employers would directly tell a job applicant that they're looking for a boy. And in some ways, I'm glad for that man's candor, because at least I knew what I was up against. There was no glass ceiling. There was a big brick wall, very solid and visible in front of me. And I wasn't trying to move up. I was just trying to move forward. Discrimination was not invisible for me. It was opaque, and it stared me squarely in the face as I grew up. About 10 years later, when I was in my late 20s, I was dating a mechanical engineer. He was doing graduate work at the University of Victoria, and I became close with all of his mechanical engineering friends, 5 men and 1 woman, Kim. Among her male peers, Kim fit in very well. She was the type of woman who felt comfortable around men. She was smart, she had a good sense of humor, she could hold her own. And she reported to me that she felt absolutely no gender discrimination within her program. She loved mechanical engineering, she loved the people she worked with, the students, the professors. As far as I could see, all of these students liked each other, supported each other personally and professionally, and spoke respectfully of each other. One of the men in the group, Dale, told me privately that Kim's graduate supervisor was a male professor who had publicly said aloud, when no women were present, that women just weren't cut out to be engineers. Dale and the other engineering students, including my boyfriend, chose not to tell Kim because they didn't want to upset her relationship with her supervisor nor her experience of her studies. For Kim, the glass ceiling was real. She didn't see it. And universities or employers calling her supervisor for a reference wouldn't have seen it either. Maybe even her supervisor didn't see it, in the sense that perhaps he wouldn't have articulated his prejudices in such a way. Maybe he even thought that he was supporting Kim and trying to do the best for her. I don't know where Kim is today. and what she's doing, and I suspect she's probably doing just fine. But my point is that there have probably been several instances when gender bias has cost her opportunities, and she may not have been aware of it. It's well documented that in the so-called corporate pipeline, men and women often start out about equal in entry-level positions, and then women become increasingly underrepresented in the hierarchy towards senior-level positions. Why is this? In both stories I've mentioned, mine and Kim's, I'm guessing it's likely that the senior's home maintenance guy and Kim's supervisor were probably basically good guys. I don't think they were maliciously plotting to destroy women. I don't think they had anything against me or against Kim personally. I also think it likely that even today, when we assume people are more woke, that many people of all genders and races and orientations and abilities, etc., are still guilty of the same type of discrimination that creates brick walls or glass ceilings based on stereotypes and unconscious bias. It's important to note that both Kim and I are white, heterosexual, and cisgender, able-bodied, etc. There are other levels of prejudice seen and unseen against people of color, LGBTQ+ people whose identity does not align with the gender binary. And then there's the whole issue of social class, which intersects all these social categories and complicates the issues of discrimination even further. Today I'm speaking primarily from a gender lens, again about prejudice against girls and women. While some of my conclusions can be applied to other groups who experience discrimination, it's important to note that each experience of discrimination is unique and beyond the parameters of my talk here today. My hope is that I do not do a disservice to people whose experiences and voices are not represented here. There's plenty of research that reveals the conscious and unconscious bias preventing women and people of color from achieving their goals. For example, in an American study entitled, "Are Emily and Greg More Employable Than Lakeisha and Jamal?" copies of the exact same resumes were given to employers for consideration, with only the names changed. Some with stereotypically white names and some with stereotypically African American names. The findings suggested that white names received 50% more callbacks for interviews. Names like LaToya Jackson were not received as favorably as names like Margaret Johnson or Susan McDonald, for that matter. Such discrimination occurs even before anyone walks through the door, and factors like skin color, hairstyle, body shape, and clothing come into play. To provide another example, I think it's quite well known now about the effects of blind auditions for symphony orchestras. In the 1970s and 1980s, a number of orchestras adopted blind auditions whereby screens were used to conceal the identity and gender of the musician from the jury. In the years after these changes were instituted, the percentage of female musicians in the 5 highest-ranked orchestras in the United States increased from 6% in 1970 to 21% in 1993. In spite of such research, some people believe there is no glass ceiling or discrimination. When asked what they're trying to do to help women or people of color have equal opportunity, they reply, "Well, we select the best candidate for the job." This is the employment equivalent of saying, "All lives matter," or "I don't see color." The criterion of best candidate for the job is highly subjective. Certainly in job competitions, there are minimum requirements, but usually the applicant pool is teeming with people who meet and surpass such standards. Whether you're hiring a new teacher at SMU or appointing a Supreme Court justice, you can usually find several people who would do an outstanding job. Employers look beyond a straightforward checklist of skills and attributes, and this is often where unconscious bias or the glass ceiling comes into play. This is not even to mention promotions and appointments to positions, which is another issue again. So what factors are considered in promotion and advancement to higher level positions? So-called fit is one of those elusive criteria for hiring. How will a person fit into a work culture and contribute to the team? Will other employees like this person and be able to work well with them? We tend to prefer and select people people like ourselves. We assume that people like ourselves are best able to do the job because, after all, aren't we doing an outstanding job? Haven't we worked really hard to get here? Shouldn't candidates go through the same process in education that we did? I could provide additional research support, but I think most of us intuitively know that both overt discrimination and unconscious bias occur in all spheres of human activity. Not only in business, commerce, and employment, but also in politics, humanities, and the arts, we see under-recognition of women's abilities and achievements. When I look at the art of Lee Krasner, Sonia Delany, and Elaine de Kooning, I struggle to understand, apart from gender bias, of course, why these painters have been so overlooked in comparison to their famous husbands. When I see the superhuman efforts of women like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Rosalie Abella, I admire them tremendously. And I also wonder about the other talented women who were not prepared to, or chose not to, endure the extreme challenges that these legal pioneers overcame. I have been thinking about these issues my entire life, or at least since I was 17 and applied for a summer job. I understand that not everyone has. The glass ceiling is part of my life. Even if I don't like it or agree with it, I accept that it exists. Other people may not see the glass ceiling, hence the metaphor of glass, or the glass ceiling simply doesn't exist for them. I can feel angry and frustrated at the injustice of systemic discrimination. I wish we could find some kind of magic bullet solution to the problem, but unfortunately, I don't think it exists. I don't expect that I will see complete justice in my lifetime, but I can expect to see improvement. I can also expect to find joy along the way. African-American writer Alice Walker has written that resistance is the secret of joy. Resistance means we're not complicit in our devaluing or dehumanization. Resistance means we find the roots of courage and authenticity in ourselves. Resistance means we create more space for ourselves and for others. As Harvard theologian Sharon D. Welch would put it, resistance means that we create a matrix of possibility. Our individual actions contribute to a larger culture. They create a matrix that enables future possibilities for change. Once women, people of color, and others who experience systemic discrimination, once we become part of workplaces, once we become executives, once we assume positions of leadership and power, we show to others that it is possible. We change the culture, we change the inner workings of organizations, so that when other women and people of color apply, they are seen as being a good fit. We can read the studies and do the research and do political advocacy and go to protests, and I do all that. The tough part, though, comes down to how to live. For individuals for whom the glass ceiling is real, we have to choose what to do and when to act. When do we say to ourselves, help me accept the things I cannot change? And when do we say to ourselves, when do I change the things I cannot accept? It's essential for us to develop the skills of cultural analysis so that we can perceive glass ceilings and other invisible social forces. Only then will we know how to strategize and to act. My individual actions help me determine my life, but my joy, freedom, and self-expression derive also from the hard work of others. I am gratefully aware all the time of the debt I owe to courageous, creative people, the sung and unsung heroes who have expanded possibilities for women. I feel the desire to continue their work. Wealth begets wealth. Diversity begets diversity. Freedom begets freedom. Joy begets joy. Just as the price of democracy is eternal vigilance, so too the price of justice is eternal work. The more we stand up for our principles and the more we fight for what we believe in, the more we attract people to us who believe in the same things. The more we fight to achieve equality, the more we enable others to do the same. There is no easy fix, no easy answer beyond this. Hopefully, we can make the work joyful and find our people along the way. This is what I have discovered in my own life. I accept the work, and the reward is joy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McDowell, for sharing with us tonight.
Let's now pass the show over to the heads of Smooth Talks to conclude tonight's event.
Good evening, everyone. We hope that you all enjoy the speeches tonight. My name is Steven, and along with Nora and Elena, we are the heads and lead organizers for this year's Smooth Talk. We would like to firstly thank our student speakers, Delaney, Beatrice, and Jan, for sharing with us. I know it takes a lot of courage to be so honest in front of the audience. Your talks are truly moving and inspirational.
Thank you to Mr. Geddes for being our sponsored teacher since day one, and for being so supportive of us. And thank you to the organizers of the event. Without you, nothing would have been possible. Thank you to Ava for making the slides, for Tina and Karina for being the MCs, and to Tomoe for being our performer. A huge thank you to Sherry for making all the posters and designing all the Instagram posts. And a huge thank you to all the club members. And we understand that during this special time there are a lot of changes happening, and we truly wish that you take something away from today's speeches.
Lastly, we would like to thank Miss McDonald for sharing her insights with us tonight. Miss McDonald, would you please come up to the stage? We would like to present you with a little gift to show our appreciation. Thank you. That's it for tonight. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you.
And club members and speakers, any speakers, please stay behind. We would like to take a group photo. Thank you for coming.